made it.
Hello again. I am your AI co-host, and welcome to 3reate. 3reate is a podcast focused on the process of doing and the process of novel invention, all from the foundation of creativity. Each month will bring you no more than 5 episodes through the lens of art, science, and/or technology. You can support this podcast at patreon.com/3reate or at ko-fi.com/3reate. What do Aristotle's first principles and a growth mindset have to do with building great products? Andrew and Nathan dive deep into how these concepts fuel modern innovation, emphasizing rapid iteration, embracing failure, and learning from constant customer feedback. But when is this fast-moving approach dangerous? The conversation takes a fascinating turn into high-stakes environments, with stories from an advanced materials lab and the chaotic floor of a hospital emergency department, where changing a single workflow can have dire consequences. Finally, they explore the double-edged sword of today's easy-to-build software, from the explosion of fart apps to major privacy disasters like the dating app leak, asking if we've lost touch with the first principles of human connection itself. And now, the humans.
You have power.
Yes. For the record, I had power yesterday. I just didn't have internet. So for the record, I live in Puerto Rico, and there's a notorious power issue. There was a little brownout yesterday, and my internet provider did not come back up when the rest of the power came out. So we were trying to record.
Three times? Twice?
Twice.
Yeah.
But it was weird because we tried to record. I lost power. I lost internet. It came back, and I was using it, and then we rescheduled to try and record again. And then once we got on the call, or once we started to record, it dropped again. The little inside joke that Andrew caused it all.
I'm waiting for you to drop.
I was going to say, we'll see what happens today.
If you drop randomly, I'm just going to publish.
That's fine. Release the monologue.
2-minute podcast.
Yeah, how you been? No, how I've been. How you been?
Yeah, I'm good. I've been taking a little bit of a break this week, and I think next week, which means I just work on ideas less.
Yeah, work a little bit less.
I can't.
Or work on different things.
Yeah, I think that's really what it is, right? It's doing a lot of software stuff and then pausing that, getting back to catching up on reading. I've been moving like physical stuff around in like my office and like my living space to change stuff up a little bit, and hanging out with people, catching up with folks I haven't had time to in the last few months. And then starting new stuff, of course, because it's like I feel like anyone who's really creative or successful can't take a break. You don't know how, right? You're like, you take a day off and you're like, oh, that was great. And then the next day you're like, okay, I'm going to do something. And maybe it's not your work, but you're going to go learn how to do a skill, or you're going to learn how to or research something that you didn't know about. It's like a never ending pursuit, at least in my experience.
Yeah.
Everyone I know, people take time off, but it's always, I'm going to go do like a activity, like I'm going to go climb a mountain in my time off, which most people would not probably consider leisure.
Yeah, we're getting a little too close to the topic here.
Yeah,
but sure. No, I think this whole idea of work-life balance is certainly something that people should probably. And I'm speaking out of something that I'm a little bit hypocritical, but people should be taking this into account.
Yeah,
this idea of taking time off. But I think there is something to be said about doing things that you enjoy, even if it doesn't sound like taking a break.
Right.
I think. Personally, when I start looking at a bunch of different topics, it's fun to see a little bit of crossover. You start to understand first principles and what carries over from one domain to the other.
Ooh.
And some people might say it's a lot of focus. But
what are first principles?
Oh, okay. It's a good question. I think you have to try and define it. For me, I think of it more of a abstraction that is at such a level that you can dig into another domain. So let me try and think if I could. Resource management, I think, is a good first principle. A lot of things in life are about managing your resources, whether your resource is time, or if your resource is money when it comes to a company, or your resource is labor, human labor. I think the idea of resource management is a first principle. I could be totally wrong, by the way. This is my own definition here. and I think that's the stuff that I'm talking about when I start looking at different industries. You see a little bit of this overlap, and that's how you can withdraw these first principles is regardless of whether you're working in healthcare or technology or a nonprofit, you all have resources and you're all trying to manage them a certain way. Did I do a good job?
I think so. I'm going to ask AI.
Ooh,
So we're going to get 12 pages of answers. Yeah, I would just say generally as AI is thinking, it's figuring out like what is the root initiators, causes, facts that matter to understand a problem or an outcome. And it's really hard to do for a lot of people. I don't know if it's hard to do, period. I think it's really hard to do for a lot of people because it's really easy to just follow like a leading conclusion and then create evidence to support that without actually being objective to say hydrogen and two oxygens make a water. But you could very easily stop and say water is good. I like water. So the first principles idea would be like what makes up water? Hydrogen and oxygen combined. Versus,
I think there's a key element of like understanding the root or trying to get as close to the root as you can, because you can easily deceive yourself into thinking that you've understood it when there might be some other higher level idea at play.
Okay, so it was 12 pages, but I'll just read the first paragraph because I think it's a very succinct, correct. First principles thinking is a problem-solving approach that involves breaking down complex issues into their most fundamental irreducible truths, and then reasoning up from there. This method encourages a departure from relying on analogies, assumptions, and conventional wisdom, fostering a path for groundbreaking innovation and a deeper understanding of the subject at hand. Apparently, it's attributed to Aristotle. So
a little bit of fluff, but I think I agree with a lot of that.
Yeah, it's first principles is the most basic forms, and I think a lot of people also get trapped in the ever-longing pursuit of irreducible, I guess, new word, in that the water example is great. So I love soda. What is the first principles understanding of soda? It's water and caramel color and sugar and some kind of flavor. Okay, there's my common elements. But actually, like we were saying earlier, water is hydrogen and oxygen. I mean, there's another level. You can go to quantum. You can say, what is hydrogen and what is oxygen and what is their subatomic structures? And then I'm sure there's subatomic, or like you can go forever. So it is a little bit hard, I think, in the modern world to reduce things. Like a technology problem would be a great example. If we don't have to go write assembly code to solve a first principles problem in most computing. Like some computing, yes. You do have to go to the assembly level. You have to write C to like really get the performance or be able to manipulate the software, the hardware in ways you want to go. But in most problems, you don't need to do that. So you still have to be able to right size. So I think it's like everything else in creativity. You need to know when to push further and you need to know when to pause.
Balance.
Yeah,
the balance behind it.
And sometimes you don't have the time to get to first principles, so you get as close as you can, and maybe that's okay. But it still comes back to what is your objective? What are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to accomplish the understanding of the thing, or are you trying to use that understanding to solve a problem, to drive an outcome in a much better way? And I find that even really smart people have that problem.
Yeah, I don't know that anyone can claim to know that they don't have that problem. Or if they are, they're tricking themselves.
It's really easy.
We're all human, I think,
but it's really easy to declare victory without honest measurement. And when you're the one developing the measurement, it's really easy to just cook it.
Yeah, nudge things in the right direction. So say, I did it.
Exactly. But that kind of leads in, I think, to like, I know what I want to talk about today was like growth mindset and what that means and how to work in that, because I've been thinking a lot of, I think I teased this a little bit on LinkedIn, but I've been thinking a lot about that this week. And earlier in the weekend, I guess it's been about a week now because we're recording a little bit late.
Yeah, we're in the next weekend. Yeah.
But about a week ago, I just serendipitously had a bunch of conversations with people, and it all ended up centering around this kind of idea of like growth mindset or like iterative development and this can be applied to anything. It's not just software. What I'm finding is that a lot of people will have the desire for a growth mindset or use the words or kind of wish for it, But when it comes to actually executing on it or to enable or embody that idea, they fall completely flat or get scared or. And I think it's impossible to know if a group of people or a company, like we've talked a lot about hiring, if they actually do it or they pay lip service to it until you're in it. I think you can probe, but I like people lie. They really want growth.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's easy to say things.
Yeah.
It's easy to say. It's harder to do. Yeah.
And so I think, maybe I'll use AI. We'll get AI in here.
So for a little bit of background,
Yeah.
this growth mindset is I think it's psychology in the field, but Carol Dweck is, I think, the most well known for this, for building this up. But there's the growth mindset and there's a fixed mindset. And people who tend to have a growth mindset are quote unquote better off in life. So if you have a fixed mindset, you tend to start thinking that things are out of your control. You start to think that things are the way they are and you have no real effect on what those outcomes are. The growth mindset is almost the opposite, where you feel like there are some things that you can do. You obviously recognize there are things you cannot control, but if you have this growth mindset, you can take things into your own hands and get better at something. So I think a common example is something like math. A lot of people might say that they're just not math people. And when you say you're not a math person, you are adopting a fixed mindset in the sense that you don't feel like you believe you can improve your math ability. And that is a natural limiter to your capabilities. Whereas someone with the growth mindset might say, yes, I'm not great at math, but I can study it or I can do something or I can get better at it. So it doesn't only apply to like specific subjects and like things you learn in school, but just I think in general is whether you have a growth mindset in your capabilities or not.
Yeah, Nathan GPT.
And this is something I've looked at for a while. Like Andrew and I, we share similar ideas, right? So we like to think about these types of things.
I agree. Yeah.
Was that fact check me on
I
this
did.
stuff?
Yeah. I'm fact checking you with AI.
Assume,
full disclaimer.
Never assume that I know what I'm saying. Double check me on that.
No, you called it. But
nice.
Like some of the broke down a nice table here of like growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and like beliefs about abilities. For a growth mindset, abilities and intelligence can be developed through effort and learning versus fixed. Abilities and intelligence are innate and unchangeable. Approaches to challenges, embraces challenges as opportunities to learn and grow in the growth mindset. Fixed mindset avoids challenges to prevent potential failure and looking unintelligent. That's, I think, there's some other ones there, but that's the big one that I see quite a bit. Like this is where you get like passive aggressive from. This is where you get conflict avoidance from. And I don't think it's necessarily that people don't want to look unintelligent. It's possible, but I think it's really just a fear of failure. And either the company or the environment is anti-failure. And if you don't fail, you don't learn. So if you're in that environment, good luck. You're not ever going to produce anything great. Or you yourself or the culture of the team or the culture of the company is a non-failure company. And again, like we've talked about this a lot, but the failure thing, if you're continuously failing, you're doing it wrong. Right? You need to be succeeding. And a lot of times I see people will try to take on too much of a change or too big of a change or too complicated of a change and too big of a chunk. And so part of like iterative development in software, and you can apply this principle to anything you do in life too, and it relates again with first principles, is you try to break down the problem into a small enough thing that you can execute on and know as quickly as possible whether or not it worked. And then you produce more and more results based on that. When you're doing development, you will hit points, and I guess this is the same probably for anything, that you do need to kind of like either take a leap of faith or a well-informed risk to try to get to the next step or kind of get to the next stage or really push yourself forward. Because if you're constantly making little itty bitty progress and never encountering anything super hard or challenging or things that are going to require, you're probably not doing anything great either, or you're not solving the right problems. And so I see this a lot, and it really like breaks down, I think, into in software, it's like, give me the plan versus give me the outcome or give me the parameters in which to operate. And we've talked about that about in art. It's a lot easier to say like your parameter if you're painting is like the canvas or the paper or the wall or the object or whatever you're trying to paint. It's not infinite, right? You're not painting the world. No one's really going out and trying to do that. It's the amount of paint you have. It's the colors you have. It's the brushes you have. And you can augment that. You can buy more paint. You can mix paint. There's tricks and stuff you can do. We have fundamental constraints. And I find a lot in software, you do have fundamental constraints, but they're more invisible. It's the people's time. It's people's attention. It's the ability to collaborate on complex issues. And it's much more harder to measure that period. And so the human time and attention is a squandered resource. And you'll see this manifest in ways like having meetings to talk about doing stuff instead of doing stuff and then doing a demo of what you did, or talking through, we're working on project X, but we've hit these snags, versus, well, what if we kept talking about how we would do project X, or how would we approach it, or what would we do? It's an intellectual, ideological framework, and that's really important in doing this. But I find a lot of companies and a lot of teams can't say stop. Or when you do say stop, they get really uncomfortable because you haven't fully conceived of every possible tangent, or there's known unknowns that make people uncomfortable. But you still have to produce stuff. Because I always, in the physical world, if you're making coffee mugs on the assembly line and you have 1,000 coffee mugs a day, and then all of a sudden there's 10 coffee mugs, someone's going to be like, hey, what happened? Maybe we wanted to do this and we wanted to run like some specialty mugs that were more labor intensive or whatever, or something fucked up somewhere, and then you have to figure it out. But in software, it's like you get a lot of these kind of silent errors, or people will go and work in a development branch and work and never actually get it in front of customers, or get it in front of the wrong customers, so that you don't actually get a widespread understanding of it, which again comes back to the growth mindset of iterating really fast, getting it in the hands of your customers, understanding if they want to adopt that or if they are naturally adopting it, and how to go forward. And I've heard this also, again, last week I was listening to a podcast with people talking, they're talking about this too. You want your customers to be pushing features to you. Hey, I want this, or it should work like this, or could it do this? And that doesn't mean you do what the customer says, but that starts to inform, as you're developing as a development team, what are those things that you should be looking at developing, versus pushing features is, I'm going to develop this thing and I'm going to put it out to the customers and they're going to love it. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But the biggest risk with feature pushing is that you're developing in isolation. You really don't know. And so then a lot of companies will make the next common mistake of getting one or two customers involved, and like they love it, right? So now you're developing and you're getting quote unquote customer feedback. But the reality is you're getting a couple customer feedbacks. You're not getting a growth vector of customer feedback. And so when it comes to product management, that's the hard problem of like, how do you balance the business needs, the development ability, the customer needs of 50,000 customers, 100,000 customers, 80 customers, 20 customers, whatever that number is, but also still have a vision that you're putting out things that, you know, your customer is not really thinking about. Because anybody who's ever built software will know the mom test we talk about all the time. People think they know what they want. The reality is they don't, or they have a very specific problem they want solved, which may or may not be common with other people. And that's okay. But the hard part of product management and the hard part of software development is getting an abstract view to really push things forward, which often requires a vision. So that was a rant, kind of.
I think there are two things I wanted to highlight. I think one of the things we talk about a lot too is the embrace of failure. And I think when people say something like growth mindset, they associate a few things with it and assume that they're taking this into account, but failure is not part of the equation. And as an engineer, I see a lot too, the whole idea of perfection is the enemy of whatever the idiom is. Yeah. but people, especially engineers, try to build the perfect solution before rolling it out. And I think the key element here is you can't have growth without some of that failure.
Yep.
So even if you want to try, or if you're saying you're trying to adopt this growth mindset, you're not adopting the growth mindset if you're never really learning what your actions are, what the outcomes of your actions are. So you need that feedback in order to direct your growth, right? It's not just wait until you have the perfect thing. But yeah, it's. But
we've talked about this. It used to be like you had to because you put it on a CD or a floppy.
It was expensive.
Yeah, and you shipped it, right?
Right?
And if there was a bug, then you had to do another medium push, or like your customer couldn't get it until you went through this massive software. But with the age of the internet and SaaS systems, you can have a bug and have it fixed in a couple minutes. And I think people have also become much more bug tolerant or much more failure tolerant for things that they're using. And a lot of people don't like it. And constant change is definitely bad for humans. Like humans don't do well at that. So you do have to find the balance between like iterative development of a feature release and just constantly and just throwing out so much crap that it doesn't work. And then you have to fix it. That's bad too. That's a really bad customer experience. So again, in the product world, you have to really balance between how do I get this in front of people? How do I get information from them with maybe it isn't exactly ready and it might not quite work the way we want. And it could be a bad customer experience. One way a lot of companies do this, and I'll talk about how we're going to do that in a second, but you'll see like beta. Everyone's probably familiar with beta, alpha, beta, general release, GA kind of stuff. And a beta used to be, and still is in a lot of circles, software that's like relatively ready, but you probably shouldn't put your
rely on it.
You probably shouldn't rely on it. Or if you are, you got to know that it might change drastically. Things might get removed, that kind of idea. The SaaS method is a little bit different, and a lot of companies will use something they call it preview. It's a little bit of a nomenclature change. But the idea of a preview tends to be more of the philosophy that we're giving you like an early example of something. We're previewing you a feature that may or may not change. It may or may not break. It may not work the way that you intended. It's not really a beta in a sense that it's like relatively baked, or it's baked enough where people can get the idea on whatever you're trying to do. And then there's also generally some support around preview features. So like Gmail for the longest time was in preview. It was in beta, then they moved it to preview. And then they still do this with a lot of the Gemini stuff. Like Gemini for a long time in Google Apps was like in preview state. And they had an explanation, but it was essentially like, we're throwing this in and it might break, but good luck. You don't have to use it either. And so you're not obligating that feature set to be required to use your software by your customers. You're not obligating your support and all the documentation, technical, all these other people and software companies that have to do work, but you're able to get some data. You're able to see if people are using it. Descript, which is the application I use to edit the podcast, does this too. They have a little feature pane that you can go in and preview stuff. So the moral of the story there too is like when you're previewing things, you might not know exactly what all of the solution for the problem is or everything you're going to do, but you should have parameters on what success looks like. And so an easy parameter is, are people using it? It's binary, right? Yes, they are. No, they're not. That doesn't, either way, if people are using it or people aren't using it, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it's a really easy way to gauge adoption. But what gets to be really challenging is depending on what your software is doing or what you're trying to push from a business objective, trying to figure out some sort of measurement, typically around, does it make money? Do people subscribe to it? Do people use the product more, which means they have more hours in the product, which theoretically means they value it more? You could be like Gemini as an example. If I was a product manager on that, I would probably be looking at, are people using it? And then are they spending more or less time in Gmail? Because if they're spending less time, maybe the Gemini preview feature is working really well and they're getting what they need and it's a much more bigger value for them. If they're spending more time, maybe they're finding more value in being able to actually get into their email. Were they ignoring it before? So it opens up a lot of questions that then you need to go dive into the data to try to start to understand. that's when you start cohorting user segments, or a lot of mature products already have this, but you have your power users in email who are your like executive people who get way more email than they can read. They're in there. Gemini's cutting their time in Gmail by 20%. That's a huge success. Whereas you have the administrative assistant whose job it is to read all the email, and they're in there a lot more, but you're seeing a lot more emails get responded to, or you're seeing a higher volume of replies than they were before, which means they're maybe more productive in being able to communicate out more. So there isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all metric. And this is the product teams never really want to dive into because it's hard. And as we were talking about earlier, it's also really easy to bake that metric. Oh, we have X massive use of the feature. It's successful. Not necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to hear. I'm an engineer. You're a product guy, I guess. I don't know if you'll put those labels, but
product person.
Well, one thing I did want to product guy, the product guy. It's actually very interesting to see, especially in tech companies. You have teams of engineers and product people working together. And there are interactions that happen. And I think it does change between organizations, but it's very interesting to hear from your perspective how you look at things. And hopefully you see it from, you work with enough engineers to know, at least when we talk, you explain certain things that okay, you have an engineer's perspective on these types of things. Yeah. So it's very cool to hear a lot of that. One thing that I want to mention though, as an engineer, if you do put a product out there, don't just label it beta for the sake of labeling it beta just to get information. Like, at least put something out there that you actually do believe is going to be something that you eventually take over as a full-on product. Just being honest, or be honest with your work, at least, is the only thing I wanted to mention there.
Yeah, and you should just assume that if you put something out, it'll be adopted. But that also means, like, when it comes to engineering, like maybe you don't make it scalable. Right? Maybe you make some trade-offs and say, I'm going to embed this feature into this product. We know at 1,000 uses per minute, the thing's going to fall over. So we'll introduce a queuing method to just say, we're busy, check back in 5 minutes. A shitty user experience, but probably way easier to build and design than to build some massive infrastructure to support tens of millions of people out the gate if you're not going to have it. And so again, it's always a conversation of trade-offs to try to understand where you get. But what I find is a lot of teams, I make them very uncomfortable. And I've worked with teams where I have engineers that will talk about something. It's like in a one-on-one, kind of like we're doing now. Wouldn't it be cool if, this thing did this? Oh, how would you mean? We talk for a few minutes, we go on to something else. A week later, here's the thing we talked about. And it's, that actually is way cooler than we thought it was. Like, what would it take to put this out? Oh, hacked it together, blah, 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 blah. And it's not really production ready, but if we get it in front of 10% of our users, because scaled releasing is another technique where if you have a million users and you release it to 1% of them, it's probably not going to fall over versus going to a full million. So there's all sorts of strategies to test things, experiment with things. But I find a lot of teams get really skittish around that, and sometimes like everything else, like I said, you should expect an experiment or a preview to become like a fully supported thing, but not all the time, right? If all of your experiments are succeeding, you're probably not doing the right thing.
That's an interesting statement. I think it just tie back into the idea of the growth mindset.
Yeah,
right? You need to expect some sort of failure.
Exactly.
You're growing.
When you're
not pushing the boundaries.
And it probably shouldn't be 80% of what you do fails. That could be good depending on if you're trying to do some novel technology approach. Yeah, like I'm sure OpenAI and ChatGPT 3 went through all sorts of hell, or ChatGPT 2 was terrible. Or I don't even know what it was called, ChatGPT 2. I think it was just like GPT-2 or something like that.
It was just GPT. Yeah, the ChatGPT 2.
Yeah, because it was too slow and sucked. It was really, really inaccurate. But they kept putting things out and experimenting, and now we're here. So it's a really, I don't know, I think it's an old school way of thinking in a lot of ways, I think, like early internet days thinking, but unless you're at a really massive company, like multi-billion-dollar company where you have the full product teams, including support and technical writers and marketing people and all this kind of stuff, like small teams should be putting out things like every week in my mind. If you're not putting something new in front of a user or enhancing the user experience at least weekly, you're probably doing it wrong. I know like the traditional sprint is usually like 2 weeks. Some teams will do a week sprint. It's all kind of guidelines. But even on a 2-week sprint, it's like there's 3 months in a quarter. So you probably have 5 sprints, 5 full sprints in quotes. People are taking off time, they get sick, bugs happens, life happens. So you're not really getting much new data from users if you're only pushing out 4 or 5 new things a quarter.
Yeah, to clarify, a sprint for the non-technical people. For developers, a sprint is a segment of time. Usually it's 2 weeks. It's definable by your team. But usually you have a list of things you want to try and get done by that sprint, and you deliver at that endpoint. So that's feeding into the rapid iteration cycle. And especially in software where you can do that.
And it's not always, a sprint doesn't necessarily like map to a thing either. It could be multiple things. It could
100%, yeah.
Yeah, it can be what we call tech debt, where we have to rebuild some service or some system because we've grown so much, or a new technology's come out, or an update, or something broke somewhere. So it can be any kind of stuff. But like, from a product perspective, like you need to, like the engineers always want to do that kind of thing, and you need to, but also you need to be okay being like, yeah, we're going to have to restart the service every week until we fix it. And that's just really shitty, but we need to focus on this other stuff too. And you're cringing. No one can see you cringe except for me.
I'm always cringing.
The simulation's running low on memory, so we just have to restart. We have to restart weekly.
Yeah. So I think that what I'm hearing from the conversation, or at least what we're talking about right now, this idea of iteration, there are a lot of benefits from it. Just one, it is sort of like the culture that we came from, engineers and tech people in general, coming from agile. For those who are technical, this idea of agile versus water flow, there was a shift towards rapid iteration, rapid delivery. And I think there are a lot of ideas that take hold when that kind of happens. But there are still, I think, some scenarios where you actually may not want the rapid iteration. So I think you've had more experience with a diverse team and diverse organizations. Have you seen areas where the iteration actually hinders rather than improves workflows or delivery or outcomes, what have you?
Yeah, I used to work in healthcare. Right?
Fair.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say there's very, very few industries where that's actually true. It's more true that people think that they need some level of stability, or there's a bureaucracy that's been built up to support a level of stability that's unnecessary. Embedded systems or offline systems, there's still a lot of that. Any sort of manufacturing where there's a lot of other dependencies which you may or may not be able to account for, you need to really stable. You can't just constantly be adjusting the flow rate of a nozzle on an assembly line. If you got liter bottles coming through, they need to have 1 or 0.99 liters in them to get off. Like, you can't. And a lot of those types of industries too, you don't need to. If you need really stable, really well understood things done, I find that the iteration is more unnecessary, because it's like, really understand the problem, fix it, and then you move on. You don't constantly update the nozzle sprayer. You update the nozzle sprayer when there's a new compressor put in because the compressor spec has changed a little bit, or like you're adding on, I don't know anything about what I'm talking about. So if you work in manufacturing, I apologize. But I know enough about like industrial control systems to know I don't want to do anything with them, because it's all kind of purpose-built software. And then the company who made the bottle sprayer apparatus moves on to some other thing, or every application of that bottle sprayer is slightly unique. Engineering, like physical engineering software, is the same way. I used to work in a materials design lab. And so anything for strength testing, anything for material density test, like all this is purpose-built specialty software. Most of the time it's fine, but like when the new Windows Service Pack used to come out, it would break everything. Or when the new NVIDIA card would come out with the new driver, it would break. Yeah, and you would call the company and they would either have a patch ready, or more than a few times I would call the company and I would literally talk to the engineer who like built the thing, explain to them what was going on. and then remote desktop in with them. They would collect some log files, and then they would issue like a specific patch for our version of the software or version of the machine or. And so I think there was one patch we got. It was like $50,000 patch. Yeah. Yeah. It was Windows Service Pack 2, I think, XP back in the day.
Okay.
Yeah. And the machine was for testing composite materials. And what did it do? It did effectively some kind of structural testing. So it would basically try to crush it. And
Fun.
They needed, I know, right? They needed to be able to, the amount of control on that is like insane. Levels of measurement I'm not familiar with. But then it also did a spectral analysis of the material. So as it was undergoing pressure, it was looking at visible light, infrared, like all these different types of sensors, because just because you can't see the crack doesn't mean it's happening, right? And so they were getting all this data, they would push it through whatever limit, and then they would take it over to a scanning electron microscope. So instead of using photons, using electrons to look at the actual like atomic alignment of the molecules of the thing. And then they would run that data through the crusher data. And so this machine was like, there's probably 10 of them in the world. I don't know. It's like, these are, how many people have a spectral crusher or whatever the hell it was. And I know, right? No, the engineers who were using this were explaining this to me, and I'm like, this is bonkers. This is so cool, right? They were making, this was used to make like new materials for space.
Nice.
Right.
Yeah,
so they're looking at heat, temperature, UV matters, radiation. So they're bombarding, they're crushing it, because to get off the planet is an immense amount of stress on something. Yeah. Once you're in space, it's not so bad. But then my understanding too is like, depending on the application, astral bodies will do really weird things with gravitational fluctuations in space. And so you have to like, it's unbelievably complicated to do anything to get to space, let alone in space. Like anyone who does that, like they need to be like set up for life in our society. Like people have no idea. But anyway, so like Service Pack 2 comes out, and this is a critical component. And I think there was a project going, and we had to upgrade to Service Pack 2 for some massive security. I don't remember but we had to. Yeah. Or it was so far behind that it was like, okay, we have to go
minimum
because
supported
because nothing is being supported on SP1. I think maybe that's what it was. So we updated, everything worked, and the machine seemed to work fine. And then they started doing some analysis. They were getting all this weird data coming. They're like, this is wrong. And I was like, okay, I'll take your word for it. And then I ended up calling the company, and it was literally like, you call the company and it's like, there's no voicemail system or like phone tree. It's like the secretary or whoever in the office picks up the phone. And they were like, oh, what are you talking about? And I was talking about the machine, and it does have a model number. And it was like Model 3. And they were like,
it's so simple number. That's exactly what one it is.
No, it wasn't like 00187. What's the serial number? It was like XRB18. And so then they're like, oh, that's a blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, it just has the company name on it. And then there was like a phone number, the model number, and then like the serial number. And the serial number was like 5 digits. I was like, so they're like, oh, that's so-and-so. So-and-so left the company. And I was like, okay. Oh, wow. Like, it's okay. So-and-so is here, and this other person will be able to figure out. They're out on vacation. I was like, okay. And then they're like, we'll have him call you back when he gets back. And I was like, sure. 2 weeks later, guy's out for 2 weeks, gives me a call. He's like, oh, I'm really sorry. He was on vacation, didn't have cell service or whatever. I was like, don't worry about it. Like, vacation's cool. And I was like walking him through the problem. And he's, oh, that is really weird. He's, we don't have anyone using this model because it was a super old model, but it worked.
Because you guys have the only one.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, but like a lot of this engineering stuff, the machine I think was like $5 or $8 million. And so a $50,000 patch on an $8 million machine actually makes a lot of sense, because if you have to go buy the new machine, it's probably $15 million. And then you have someone, they have to come in and calibrate it. And that was the other thing, is they had a service contract for it. And so anyway, there's a lot of calculus that goes into this. So I get him on the computer. He does his like computer thing. He's, oh, that is really weird. It should be blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't know what we're talking about. We're talking about units I didn't know existed of measurement. And he's like, yeah, this is weird. I'm going to really have to dive into this. I might have to come out and see this for myself, because it was such a weird issue. And so I was
Yeah.
telling him what we were doing. He's okay, cool. So he comes back and like he had to rewrite the driver or something for the new way that SP3 was interacting with because it was all serial connection.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm surprised that they ended up using Windows.
Yeah.
Just have an embedded thing. You don't have to go through serial bus.
This was like long enough ago where embedded Linux wasn't. It
Wasn't good
was
enough.
a
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
but it was pretty rare.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, everybody was coming off NT, or some of it was even Windows 3.1. Like scanning electron microscope was from the 70s and ran, I think, like Windows 3.1.
Yeah. Wow.
But it worked.
Yeah.
And the scanning
Yeah,
electron microscope is ridiculously expensive.
Yeah.
And if it works, it works. Everybody, like, we get so used to it, like consumer tech, to get your new iPhone or your new Android phone every year. A lot of the world doesn't have that. In a lot of industries, you don't upgrade stuff that doesn't work, or you buy your machine every 20 years, right? And so that kind of software needs to be ridiculously stable and bulletproof, or be solvable by a reboot. Right?
Just turn it off, turn it back on. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that was a really tangent. I forgot all about that. It was a frustrating but very fun job. We were doing 3D printing before that was a thing. Like before that was cool, we were 3D printing metal, and because it was a composite engineering group, and so they were developing like, how do we 3D print with metal? We'll invent that. It's really cool.
Oh, was it like some sort of hybrid like molding technique, or was it like the?
I have no idea.
Okay,
I don't remember. It's probably all patented now, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Fuse, I think it's called fused deposit modeling, where they kind of print layers, but that doesn't work very well for metal, so they have a sintering technique.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, like they would do it was like a so they like shoot plastic, and then they would layer the metal on top of it with the structure, and then you like bake the plastic. They're trying all these different things to try to get. Maybe I should have someone on who does this for a living, because this is like incredibly fascinating, and I know almost nothing about it. But so I've done that. And then obviously healthcare is another one where any kind of software update can kill people, literally, or contribute to killing people. And so you want to be pretty spare with that. However, regulations change, workflows get improved. Everything is always like, nothing never changes. Everything is always in change. Right. And so the world, I think now, all the things I just talked about was like 20 years ago. I don't know if that's even real in today's world. I think everything has probably got some sort of a software service update. And if anything's connected to the internet, obviously you have a whole different level of security that you need to have. But yeah, healthcare is a big one where you had to make sure the change did what you thought it did, but it was also much more on training. And the worst thing you can do in a healthcare environment is change people's workflows without them understanding like why you changed it, or what you think is better might not be better.
Yep. Yeah.
And I don't know how much of this I can talk about. There was
it doesn't apply just to like new patches, but like when people come up with new products, they don't think about the workflows, and they're like, "Oh, just use this."
Exactly.
And that's not how it works.
Yeah. So I was working in healthcare at a hospital, and in the emergency department, there was a lot of regulation at the time that was getting changed, and so a lot of new things were happening. The hospital had just went up on the electronic record a few months before. Those processes would take years sometimes, and so you'd get on, and then a couple months later, you're basically rebooting everything because all of the changes have happened or the updates. And so that was and they still do this. Most hospitals don't do it like monthly, but so they're doing a big update. And then they would usually add different workflows. So the hospital would all go up on the EHR, but like some departments would be carved out because they were too complex, or the software wasn't ready, or there's all sorts of reasons. And so the emergency department typically would always go up first, because the highest opportunity, the meaningful use law at the time was really focused on that. And there was how do I explain this to people who know nothing about this? So when you go into an emergency department, you get triaged, typically a lot. And so when you walk through the door, come in through an ambulance, if you come in through an ambulance, it's already done before you get there usually. But when you walk in through the door, they'll assess you. Are you bleeding? Is something like hanging off your body that shouldn't be? Is there something in your body that shouldn't be? I'm kind of being funny, but it's
true.
Yeah.
If you have something lodged in you,
yeah.
probably don't
or does your tooth hurt? Or do you have chest pain? Chest pain's another one where it might be serious. It might not be serious. But anyone who's been in a busy emergency room or has been sitting there seeing people coming in on stretchers full of blood, they're like, yeah, you're going to treat those people first because it's more of an emergency than you have. That sucks as a person who's there or as a customer or a patient. Yeah. But the reality is there's only so many people that can do work on people at a time, and they're doing the best job they can to constantly reshuffle the resources to get everybody out. Nobody who runs an emergency department, nobody who works in an emergency department wants to keep you there, right? They want you gone and healthy as fast as possible because that's how it works, folks. So if you get frustrated, I get it. Believe me, they don't want you there any more than you want to be waiting in the waiting room.
Yeah.
And so there's all sorts of different ways to do this. There's usually acuity or triaging. There's standards out there. Again, like if you're being a little funny, if you're bleeding, if your arm missing, if there's some big trauma, then you're going up to the top of the line and you're getting treated. It's more life-threatening. Kids sometimes will get brought in depending upon, and if your ED has a peds unit. Most hospitals don't. They'll have an urgent care. And typically for two reasons. One, because people who are not high acuity or in need of immediate medical attention can go wait in the urgent care, sore throat, don't feel well, some weird symptoms that you're breathing and you're walking in under your own power. You're probably not going to die tomorrow or immediately, but you need help. Or you go to the urgent care and you're like, my arm hurts a little bit, and they hook you up to a monitor and they're like, you had a heart attack. We need to get you to the emergency department immediately. And it just happens to be next door. A lot of hospitals will do that. And so we were in this setting and they had just rejiggered their triage process.
Oh no, that's probably one of the worst things you could
Oh my God, yes. It was really bad. And I didn't design this, for the record. I was there. I don't remember why I was.
It was Blendrew.
Yeah. No, Andy. No, it was at the time I did a lot of physician stuff, but I was only working with the hospitalists at that. And that's right. The problem was that they were getting people balled up in getting out of the ED. Like I said, every ED wants you out. They want to treat you. They want to make sure you're healthy, but like they don't want you sitting there. It's incredibly expensive for everybody. It prevents other people from getting care. But one of the big logistics problems is that if you need to get hospitalized, aka go into the hospital onto a floor of some sort, they got to have the capacity. They have to have the staff. They have to have a place to put you. And so a lot of times that's the problem, is like they need to put you into an observation unit. There's no room. They need to put you into an ICU unit. Hopefully there's room, but there might not be room. And so they might have the capacity in the ED to treat you until you get into that level of care. Or maybe you need surgery and the surgeons are busy, or they're driving in, right? Because they weren't expecting to do a surgery, but it's an emergency surgery, so they'll treat you, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of logistics problems in the ED, and it's a very, 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 very hard problem, and no AI is not going to solve this. But many have tried. It's just too hard. It's so much experience. Like ED staff are usually some of the most experienced folks in the hospital because they see everything, and there's a lot of experience-based care that happens, for better or worse, but I would bet on an ED team any day of the week for anything.
Yeah, so throwback. If you're in that space, you're safe from AI.
For now.
How not to say whose jobs AI will not take.
You're going to get some dumbass hospital administrator who takes up oxygen in space, who's going to come in and they're going to try to put in some AI software and fire all the schedulers and the triage nurses because the AI is going to magically do it better. And like, the AI can help. I'm all for AI companioning in that instance where, and even when I was doing this, I wouldn't call it AI. I don't know what AI is, but like we had algorithms and heuristics to try to help triage because it's a very hard thing to do. And it's also, who are your staff competencies, right? If you have 10 people sitting with chest pain, you only have one heart doctor available whose heart pain is worse than other people's chest pain. It's like, how do you figure that out?
Yeah.
It's a really, really hard problem. So anyway, so they changed the security process, and I'm down there, and because my thing is half the units were like full and half the units were empty, and there was this massive like getting people out of the emergency department into the hospital. There's a whole transition process. It sucks. It's really nobody likes it, but it's just part of doing it. The ED doctors are not just sitting down there on their hands just waiting for stuff to happen. The ED departments are almost always overburdened all the time. A lot of times the hospitals too, they're doing everything they can to get people better and out, but you can't rush healing sometimes. And so there's always just too much to do, and you're always trying to figure out how do you make sure nobody dies or gets worse and gets better by trying to balance all this stuff. So they changed somebody had a brilliant idea, probably in management. I have really nothing good to say about healthcare management. That could be a whole topic. The people who touch you are probably the best people that can be there, right? Those are the people who want to be there. They call it direct patient care. I have nothing against doctors, nurses, techs, pharmacists, therapists. Like these people have to deal with a lot of bureaucratic nonsense. They have Congress making crazy laws that they have to comply with. Does that mean everybody's the best they are? No, there are shitty doctors, there's shitty everything. But on average, like you're going to get really good care in the United States when a person actually touches you. The administrators of hospitals could probably be all round up and disappeared, and it would be better. You need a certain level of administration to make sure that people are doing the thing. What's the HBO show that just came out about the ED?
You're asking the wrong person.
No, I need to. I should probably plug it. It's fantastic. Having worked in EDs, like it's the old guy from ER. He was like a kid.
I was going to say ER, but
yeah.
It's obviously not ER because you're talking about something else.
I'm like super tangenty. The Pit.
It's
The Pit, PITT. So it's about the University of Pittsburgh's emergency department. And it's probably one of the most realistic medical shows I've ever seen. It's still a show, and it's still dramatized.
That kind of begs the question, how many of these do you watch?
So I don't watch a lot because most of them are terrible. No, I've worked in, I don't know, probably over 100 EDs in America.
Oh, wow.
So
I did not know this about you.
I know, right? Okay, cool. I know things. That's probably why I don't get sick anymore. My immune system has literally been exposed to everything. But anyway, the really cool thing about this is that they take every hour of the show is an hour. So the show is, I think, 14 episodes. So it's 14 hours of a day. So you walk in the morning.
Like a real life hour.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then the next episode, it's 9 to 10. 10 to 11, 11 to 12, 12 to 1. And it's such a really cool way to do it, number one. And number two, it gives them so much more time to really bring you into that environment. And the 20-minute show, and they innovate everybody coming in, and that's not really real. But they in my observation, and a lot of people I talk to that are docs and nurses or people in EDs, they've taken like the perfect storm cases of everybody's career and somehow jammed it into a 14-hour day. And so it's just like all of these like edge case weird things that happen in your maybe once a month or once a year. It all happens in this one shift.
In the same.
And so it's fun having worked in those environments and watching it with people who do, because everyone's totally had that happen last week. So it's a fantastic show. I'm way off track. So don't change software. So the acuity, but healthcare is really under fire right now. This stupid bill that the Congress passed, BBB bill, defunded Medicaid in a lot of states, is hurting community hospitals. And there's definitely efficiencies to be gained in healthcare, but Jesus Christ, like they're just taking the bottom out of it and seeing where the people fall. And it's going to be the people who need it the most, the rural healthcare settings where these are people who have to drive 3 hours to get to the doctor because there just isn't another hospital. Those hospitals might be going away, and now you're driving 5 or 6 hours to go to the doctor. So anyway, we changed this acuity workflow, and they put all of these crazy questions so there's a lot of required questions that you need to be asked if you're going to the emergency department. But a lot of the time it's a question of when. Do you ask everybody all the questions the first time you talk to them? Or do you try to assess their acuity, and then based on their acuity, you can have somebody go talk to them in the waiting room? And so if you've ever been to the emergency department or even in urgent care, you'll go check in, they'll talk to you. They might take your vitals right away. They might have you sit down. They might, if you're sitting down, they might have you go in, talk to someone. You're back and forth you're like, I've saw 12 people. What's going on? They're doing different stages of care as they're able to, without having to do everything serially. It's a parallelized process. But someone in administration had decided we got to ask all the questions the first time the nurse talks to you. So their initial interviews were taking like 20 minutes. And 20 minutes in an ED is people die. Yeah. Right? And so this poor nurse was like complaining to me, but was just like, and then the way that they did the form, so it was electronic form, and they broke out every type of question on a different page. And so she's like going through the form, clicks to another page, goes through another form. And then it was some conditional logic where if someone says something, they have to go back a couple forms because somebody looking at this from an administrative perspective was like, that's clearly in this page. Or what a lot of times happened is they had all these pages, and it's way faster to flip through a physical piece of paper than it is software. But then they would just one-to-one it. Jesus. And so then they did that. It didn't work. And then they updated it now, and it was even worse. And so she's walking me through this. I'm like, this is insane. And then they changed a bunch of vocabulary. And so this woman has been a nurse there for 15 years. She knew everything front and back. And now it's like basically she's starting day one because they've changed all the words. And they got rid of abbreviations and wrote things out like BP, like blood pressure. Like everything now says blood pressure. And she's like, everyone who works here knows what BP stands for. No one thinks it's British Petroleum. But some administrator, legal person was like, if it doesn't say blood pressure, then someone might not do it right. And it's you don't know how people work, right? Like, why are you making all these crazy decisions?
Wow.
So I kind of like, it wasn't really my problem to solve, but part of it was the software design. So I could help with that. Part of it was the medical design, which I could help with, but not my problem set. Like I was solely physician focused. But what ended up happening is like all this balled up the doctors who were trying to admit patients because they had to go through all this crazy documentation because nursing documentation is very critical to understand what the patient's actually going through.
Yeah.
And so I had to spearhead this initiative to work with the requisite folks to bring them all in to be like, this is really a bad thing. Here's why. And it wasn't immediately obvious to a lot of the administrators, which again, I don't have really nice, there are some good administrators. We're just like, yeah, but they're like the legal, and it's always the legal. Everyone hides behind the safety of legality. And it's great, but like we've gone from getting people treated who have critical conditions from like 3 to 5 minutes to 10 to 15 minutes. You don't think that's a bad thing? That's not a liability? When you put it that way, so it's like knowing what your outcome needs to be, knowing how to measure it, and knowing when to update. So I came back a few days later. They had fixed it all to their credit, so they updated it. But then they decided they were just going to keep changing everything. And so this multi-form, I don't know, let's just say there's 20 pages of nursing documentation you need to do to admit somebody into the ED. So it got better, but then they started changing different paragraphs or different boxes on these forms constantly. So every shift, someone would come in and there would be a new change. Someone's off for 3 days because most nurses work 3 or 4 days shifts, 10, 12-hour days, depending on how you're doing it. It was off for 3 days, come back, whole new different process I need to learn. That really slows you down.
Yeah, I think that's an example of how not to do iteration.
Right.
Like when we say iteration, that doesn't mean change everything all the time.
Well, it can. And maybe it's okay, right? If your Gmail is changing constantly every time you log in, maybe that's okay. Maybe it doesn't.
But it still does the email.
Yeah. But humans are really attracted to patterns and predictability, but really bad at iteration. And so there's it's a lot of industry specific. A lot of SaaS software doesn't matter, but B2B gets weird because people will build on top of that. And anyone who's used like an Excel function that broke, or Airtable makes an update and all your fields are broken or something like that gets really annoyed. And so it's what changes are you making constantly? What are the first order changes and what are the potential second order problems that might arise. And so that's your job as a product team to figure out like, how big is this going to be? And then you want to tell people. And I think the best way to do it is, again, talking like the preview methodology. If you're going to make a big change, give people the ability to preview it, test it out before it changes, see how much of it breaks. Because if it breaks a bunch of stuff, you've now given them some time to say, oh, I need to allocate some people, or I need to change some stuff before we push this out to the entire accounting department. This forced change methodology, which has become so common in SaaS, is just absolutely terrible for customers a lot of times. Sometimes it's better, right? Apple's really updated the way all of their UI works in the new iOS, macOS. I'm on the beta. It's different, right? It took me a lot of getting used to. They, to be honest, the first iteration of it was absolutely dog. Should have never been released. Like, it was way too much. We are up our own ass, and this is the better way to do computing. Anyone who's read the internet will probably tell you everybody was like, nah, this is dumb. This is really bad. Like, they did a lot of translucent menus where I have very good vision and I can see just fine. I write software. I'm like, I don't know how to interact with this. I can't see it. Yeah, to their credit, the next version of the beta got a lot better. Things got darker, more edge definitions. Like, they took that feedback, and it was like a week or two later. It was very, very quick. They made some massive changes. So good on them. But it's a beta. I had to opt into that. I knew I was opting into it. I knew there was going to be problems. So I was able to do that. So if you can give and not every software, not every feature is able to be iterated like this. But if you can, it's worth a little bit of extra pain and suffering if you're going to make massive changes, to give people a way to test stuff out in a way that they can feel comfortable with, and then change things that you might not even be aware that they do, so that they'll actually adopt your software. Because what I see a lot is when these big changes happen, all the things break, and then the decision is, let's going to take us 20 hours to fix it. Or we could look at a better software, or we could look at a different way of doing it. And maybe that's maybe good for your company, but that might be bad for you as a software person, because now you lost a customer.
Yeah. I as you're talking, I'm thinking that there are lots of similarities, not just in how that approach works in software, but something that we talk a lot about is entrepreneurship. And when you're testing ideas out, it's a very similar methodology or an idea, right? You don't want to build an entire company with a service right out the gate. You want to have a test of what demand might actually look like for whatever it is that you're building. So this idea of whether you want to call it a beta, a pilot, whatever you have, the idea is test it, get some feedback, and then change it. And I think that's kind of the new wave of entrepreneurship, is sort of this rapid iteration around your value add or your unique value proposition.
We talked about vibe coding last week, and it's never been easier to do this, which means it's going to create a whole bunch of challenges. And I think we're going to see another wave of so many people putting out ideas. You get, like, when the Apple App Store first came out for iOS, like, they had a fart app epidemic, right? Where people would make an app where you'd hit a button and it would make a fart noise. I don't know why. This is a real thing. It was weird.
I don't remember this. Yeah,
right?
I remember hearing about this.
Yeah. And so then Apple started to put in some guidelines to have, like, minimum functionality standards. And I think your app had to do more than one thing. And so then people would be like, what if you could customize the fart sound? Yeah, exactly. And so there was a couple people, and I think it was called, like, the ultimate fart app or something, right? And so every time Apple would change the guidance, these developers would just come up with a way to make, like, a better fart app. And, like, good on them. But, like, it got rid of a lot of, and what it ended up being, I think, was people were testing ideas. The easiest thing to do was, like, put a button on a page and then make it do a noise, and then make it louder or softer. And then, so it's a great way to experiment, but that doesn't necessarily mean you want to put that in a marketplace or expose a lot of people to it either. So I think with vibe coding, we're going to see a lot of really shitty software get built, which isn't bad. When you build shitty software, that's fine, right? Like, good on you. You built something. But then, like, building something and then walking away versus building something that can grow or literally develop into something else is a much bigger challenge. And that's where I think, like, the professional developer is not going away anytime soon. Because I can YOLO code all day long and it works. It scales, actually, because I I have a background in technology, so
infrastructure.
I can do it. But like most people are not figuring this out, or they're going to do the wrong patterns because you just don't have the experience. So I think we're going to see a flood of really shitty software. That's good and bad. It's just like how it gets exposed. And what I'm a little concerned about is like all these SaaS websites popping up and you don't really know if it's a real company or if it's someone's kind of vibe code experiment. And then you're signing up all these people and then you have privacy leaks. What was that app? The T app? Is that a thing? Did you hear about this?
I'd not heard about this.
I'm going to call it that. And if it's wrong, sue me. Actually, don't sue me. No, it was some dating app. So it was only women, and it was an app, I guess, for them to talk about men or people they were dating and if they had bad experiences or something. I don't know. I think the whole thing is insane. But what ended up happening was it all got leaked on some website. And what ended up happening was I got two stories. I didn't look into it very deeply. So if this is all wrong, like I'm illustrating a point. But the technical analysis I saw of this, so they had to provide like a driver's license or a passport identity verification to prove they were a woman to be on the app. That was all stored in a public bucket. Oops.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh,
and so there was just all these images of driver's licenses just like hitting in an S3 bucket somewhere. Just so anyone who's ever done identity verification work knows that it's not hard to take a picture of somebody and then compare it to information. It's really hard to do that in a way that you don't leak that information or do this problem. The rest of the app, my understanding was it was a bunch of glued together servicey vibe codey kind of stuff. And their texting database, there's some messaging function in the app that was all open too. So all the messages that people thought were private were leaked. Again, anything you do on a technology device is not private, never will be. Don't assume that. You just assume everything's in public. And then a lot of the guys, I guess they were talking about, like they had profiles for them. And so their information got leaked and like they're all pissed because like they're basically like, I got doxxed and I didn't even know I was on the app kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is really bad. And you can debate the merits of safety and dating and all this other, but the reality is like, this is what we're going to see more and more of as it's easier to build code and websites. And that's great in my mind because it gets more ideas out. It solves more problems for people. It builds businesses potentially for people, income streams. But there's a lot more to writing software than talking to ChatGPT, getting some code and putting it up on a server. There's a lot of software design principles that AI does not work well at all. Security, all this kind of stuff. And so I think we're going to get into a kind of fart app world again, but instead of having a fart app, you're going to have a site like, I think it was Spill the Tea or something like that, actually I think had millions of people, and good on them. They created an app that had millions of people, and it was functional and professional enough where people, I guess, thought it was real, but also not at all. And how do you solve that problem is going to be a problem we have to solve. And I think, I hope that we go back to open standards and having open standards of validation for how you handle information, or you can do attestation of when security certificates were new, everybody had ways to validate how secure the certificate was. And it was like the level of encryption, the issuer is a trustworthy source, all these kind of things. So I don't know, but that adds bureaucracy again. That adds another layer, another barrier to get your thing out. So I think we're interested. We're hitting a really weird time in software, and I'm really interested to see how this goes forward.
I think in the world of web, that's a little bit harder to do. But I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit because we've talked about the difficulties of something like a Play Store or an App Store. But these things actually can defend against that. Right?
If they got round up and disappeared, I would be okay with it.
I'm just saying that it's very hard to say something's objectively wrong or right. And these ideas of app delivery stores, they can offer that security. So if someone had submitted this app and App Store had done a review, they could have figured out very easily that this is.
So I think it was. I think it was like the top app in Apple's. Yeah, it is App Store and Google Play.
Oh, no
So it
way.
is
All
called
right.
T,
Okay.
and the
Well,
website's T for Women.
oh,
I'm not
jeez.
endorsing this at all. I'm like, don't use this app.
Anti endorsement.
But it was in the news pretty recently, last like week or two. And
I've been out of it a little bit.
yeah, and wow, this is interesting. And I think it was free. So I guess at least people didn't pay
Okay,
for
at least they weren't
information
doing, yeah, at least
exposed.
they weren't making money off of it. Yeah, at least they weren't making money off
Yeah,
of
as
it.
someone who's into transparency, this whole idea that you are creating an exclusive service to libel people potentially
Yeah,
is not
terrible
okay with
idea.
me at all. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a terrible idea.
I'm sure some of the people on the app were terrible human beings and should be like weeded out, but also like you're choosing to use a platform where anybody can represent themselves in any way possible to find a person to hang out with or a romantic partner. That's the challenge. Go meet people in real life, go make friends and date friends of friends, or that's how humans did it for a long time before the internet came out. Turned to work out okay. Does that mean, all the problems of relationship abuse are solved? No. Is it better?
Yeah, I'm
Sure.
I'm cringing internally. Throwback. What kind of world do we live in?
I know, right? And again, it's you're on I've never used dating apps, but I have friends who do, and it sounds pretty terrible. You're talking to a bunch of random anonymous people for the most part, and I think a lot of them now do like identity verification. Hopefully, they don't put it in a public bucket. And then you're interacting with the app, and it's the person's best, most persuasive
Sure.
presence.
It might be an AI chatbot.
It's just an advertisement effectively. And
you could argue that's what dating is even in real life, right?
Yeah, but
you don't always show your true self when you see someone.
you should be putting your best self forward, but
all the time.
But it's an ad in sense that you can manufacture anything. I can't change my height and weight or hair color in real time in front of you. Yeah, I can dye my hair or whatever, but I show up to a date, you're going to know. And a lot of this is feeding. This is a well-studied thing, but
yes. Yeah.
I think we've talked about it a little bit. I find it fascinating that you want to find a partner, a mate or whatever, and you're cutting out all of your other senses in that process, which should be an important decision in my mind, which means it shouldn't probably have technology behind it at all. Whatever, your results will vary. But then that creates the problem of I'm looking at all these ads and people misrepresent themselves. Weird. Men and women do it. And then I don't know, I have friends who are men and women or both on these. I hear stories of it. It sounds, again, pretty terrible. And so then someone creates an app to try to protect people from other people, I guess, is what the notion of this is. It sounds like it's just gossip and libel to me. Like, yeah, sure. I
was going to say, it sounds like the latter, but
and I'm not excusing.
More noble.
I'm not excusing any of that. But if there are bad people, then the dating apps need a way to solve that problem. The better way to solve that problem is to date people or have some sort of proximity to, which is how humanity's been doing it since time began. Outside of arranged marriages, but those were usually family
old school
to family.
word of mouth marketing.
Yeah.
Old school word of mouth marketing.
Yeah, but get into dating podcast now.
Hey, doesn't that bring in a lot of listeners?
Maybe. But I think fundamentally, it's like the thing that I find is so crazy about this is it becomes basically a looks competition. And nobody wants to say that it is, but it totally is. Because you're only your one sense, your eyes.
There's a great truth to that even in the past, right? It's the first kind of thing that people anchor on.
I disagree completely.
Or maybe not anchor.
No, I disagree completely.
Really?
Yeah. So how do people meet in the past? Family, a lot of it, depending on your class or social structure, but there's a lot of family. Not you're dating your family, you have family interactions. So you're at a dinner party, right?
Okay, maybe we should clarify how far back you're thinking.
Before the internet.
Okay.
30 years.
All right. I'm sure.
And again, most people, societal norm, and the part of the problem in our current society is everybody wants to reject a norm. But yeah, there's going to be people outside of the norm. There's going to be outliers for sure. But the way that most people in society met were family or religion or some sort of social activity. That was it. So you went to church. The people at your church were potentially your dating pool. You fancied someone from across the whatever you were doing at church.
Yeah, but you fancied them initially because even if you are introduced to somebody, there's going to be some element of physical attraction.
There is. No, 100% for most people. But my point is your primary filter was at church.
Okay.
Then
so
looks.
you're talking about the first.
Right.
Sure. Okay.
And so you can make that argument with the technology. I'm on Bumble or I'm on Hinge or whatever these apps are. I'm assuming those are apps. Like I said, I've never used these things. I'm talking
those sound right.
But not really, because there's only so many of them. I know there's a million of them, but there's only so many that are actually popular and work for people on average. Again, if you're into some weird, kinky, not weird, but if you're in some weird as defined by
tread carefully.
No, that it's okay to be weird. Be weird. But you have to acknowledge that if most people are not into the thing, then most people are going to find it weird. That's what weird means. It's relative, right? What I find weird and what you find weird are going to be different. And that's okay. And it's also okay to be weird. Most people in most relationships have a certain set of parameters that they're going on. And if you're into some weird niche thing, fine. Like, you're going to be on your weird niche app and it's going to be hundreds or thousands of people and not millions of people. But anyway, your primary understanding of that person is going to be visual. And then you're going to read, and it's whatever they want to represent. Whereas at church or at a community function or as a family dinner, you're going to probably maybe smell them. You're going to be around other people who might know about them or be like, hey, you should go talk to so-and-so. You're going to have some sort of common interest. You're going to have religion is common. The activity that you're in is common. Your family. So your parents or your uncles or whoever, is inviting you to the dinner party has some sort of relationship with this other family, with this person that you met. So you're in the same occupation, you're in the same industry, you have the same economic stat. Like, there's some sort of sociological grouping that you're already a part of that these dating apps have just exploded out. And so that, I guess, helps widen the dating pool to some extent. And I know people have successful relationships on apps for a long time or get married and stay together forever, but it's a vanishingly small amount of people, because we're completely removing all of this other social stuff. And so it's like,
there are verticals of these apps that say anchor on a religion or a lifestyle. Because I know that there's like a farmer's
only.
You have to be a farmer.
I get spam for that.
I'm sure there's those weird ones out there. So like in those scenarios, isn't that first filter that same lifestyle?
It could be for a niche, for sure. And so if you're really looking for something specific, it's probably better. I don't know what the data is, but I would suspect that if you're like into farmers or like in a rural area, then you're not going to want to be on, I guess, Tinder or Hinge or whatever the bigger city apps. Maybe they're better. I don't know. I'm just supposing.
Yeah, I was going to say, perhaps we should probably know a little bit before we jump into
I haven't looked at the data since around COVID. The data is usually pretty clear on this. Like, all the dating sites lie to you, and they don't work.
Yeah, sure.
Right? And anyone who's been on it will tell you they don't work. Yeah. And again, they don't work means some people will find success. Most people don't. And we wonder why, because we're not going back to the first principles of how do people meet each other. And so when you're dating somebody, you want somebody with a common shared interest, some sort of background. And again, there are the people in the world who don't care and will just go date some random person who's totally opposite and it works. Yeah, that's pretty rare. You want some sort of commonality, but you also want to have differences, right? And that's why this stuff is, you need to have, 50-50 of things you're interested in together, things you're not interested in, or things that the other person's interested in. You don't have to, but I think with the problem with the algorithms is they try to match you on, your self-perception of what's most important to you is wrong. Everybody, men and women, universally, the many studies have been done on this psychologically, sociologically, of asking people who their ideal partner or perfect partner would be. And then you go talk to them 10 years later after they've been married for 10 years. And like the perfect partner that they're apparently married to doesn't check any of the boxes of what they thought they wanted.
Oh, okay. I can see that.
If quote unquote, love was so easy, we would have the formula, we'd dial it in, everybody would be in love, right? It's not how this works. But we as humans have figured out how to match people together. Friends are the same way, right? Getting friends on an app, like I know there's apps for this, like sometimes they work. Most of the time they're probably not, right? You're much more likely to meet a friend doing an activity or doing something you're interested in like random happenstance, then not, except for everybody's socially awkward now and we've talked, so probably not. But that's how people used to meet friends, right? You're at the bookstore and you're in the book aisle and you're like, oh, I've read that book.
Book aisle.
Right? Hey, bookstores have more than books now, my dude.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, very true. Okay, I'll give you.
I don't even know how we got talking about this, but
I was gonna.
oh, vibe coding and how it's gonna create.
Yeah, that doesn't help.
No. So vibe code, and then the T thing.
Yeah. Got it. Okay.
T wasn't a vibe coded app as far as I understand, but it was strung together in a no code sort of way, so to speak, and the people who were doing it didn't seem to know what they were doing.
Yeah, and vibe coding can enable something like that.
Yeah, and then it's just going to vibe coding is going to create more trashy apps. That just because it's a trashy app doesn't mean it doesn't have potential.
Yeah, and just because it's a trashy app doesn't mean it was vibe coded.
Hey, now I feel like I'm getting called out. Right.
No, I'm an engineer. I can say that because I've built my fair share of crappy things.
Then that's how you learn, though, right?
Yeah.
This is a good segue, and then we should probably end. But I'm trying to get Seeks, my new app, out.
Have you mentioned the name before?
I don't know.
Sure
it's out there.
Well,
it's not
now,
SEEEKS.com, the world's worst domain name, triple E. And I'm going to try to get that out next week into a preview. So it's definitely going to be some bugs, but it works. I've been using it actually internally or myself for a while, or the back end. I'm writing a front end for it to see if other people find value. But I don't think I'm going to talk about what it actually does.
Go to the website and find it.
Until it's, the website's out there, but it'll do stuff with audio. And then maybe we'll talk about it next week if I can actually get it out the door.
Okay, that's a
teaser.
Yeah, teaser for sure.
Cool. So we'll see what happens next time.
All right.
Tune in next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Bye.
All right. See ya.
You can find us at 3reate.com. It's like the word create, but with a 3 instead of the C. As always, we encourage you to listen, watch, do. We'll see you next time.
You can support this podcast at patreon.com/3reate or at ko-fi.com/3reate.
Thanks for listening.